Okay. Yeah, got another coffee. The first step is done. So we have the Localization Manager in a new version on type3.org, on packages, and in our repositories. So I told you about something that we are building on top of it. Some of you might have seen it already because we showed it on several camps, and I think the 2016 Type 3 conference was the first place where you actually was able to see the upcoming interface. Now the thing has been built for one of the translation providers and a specific client, and we still want to use the interface for a kind of improved user experience, because I think I will start with slightly different. I will just show you what the actual reason is why we need a better interface. When you go to want to use the Localization Manager and you have a page like this and you want to make use of it, then you have to create Localization Manager configuration first. Within the configuration you have to give a title, an export file name prefix. Maybe we can just call it test here, because it's just to show you how this is working. Then you have to select which way you want to deal with pages within that configuration. If you want to have this page only, and this page only means definitely this page where the configuration is put on. So the PID of the configuration determines which one you want to export. So it doesn't matter where you actually are. As soon as you're using this configuration with the name title and the export file name prefix test, it will always, for example in this case, export the congratulations page. I don't know if it actually makes sense, but this is one of the early configurations which have been available. Then you have 1 deep, 2 deep, and 3 deep, and infinite. These are all based on the same principle. So you have a starting page, and from there on everything will be exported. So you define this configuration for a specific page, and the tree that belongs to that page will then be exported. Then we have some two new features here which have been added recently. One is the current page, and current page means it doesn't matter where you are, the configuration is just taken and used for this page. So in this case the PID is not relevant anymore, and you can just pick any of the pages and use the same configuration for that. So you don't need a specific configuration for each particular page, which in my opinion makes much more sense, because most of the pages are more or less identical. So maybe you have 2 or 3 different configurations, but definitely not configurations for all the pages, and especially not configurations including too many pages and then too many records, because in many Type 3 installations, especially the ones which are not on a dedicated server where you have a lot of CPU power and memory, run into problems as soon as these levels are quite large, and as soon as the tree is quite large and contains a lot of information, because everything in the Localization Manager is handled basically the same way as if you were an editor. I can explain that later on a bit more detailed. So the next one would be a list of pages, so you can actually fill in pages and do something with especially these pages. Then you have to select the source language. You have to select the tables that you actually want to export. We can just do that now. So for example, we go here for English, and we want to have pages, no, not category, maybe even categories, pages. We want to have file metadata, file reference, and we want to use page content. And actually this should be enough for this. Then you can add some exclude elements, and this is one of these things that happens quite often in Tuple 3. This is very, very developer oriented. So as a developer, you will actually know what it means to have a comma list of table UID pairs. So example would be pages 1 and TT content 2 and all these different tables and UIDs. The point is, a typical integrator does not have to know how this should be working, and definitely editors who actually export stuff and need to deal with translations don't know all the details that you need to know to actually work with this field. Same for the include elements field. And there are some other configurational things here, like override existing labels, translate all content elements on pages on import, which is, in my opinion, not necessary anymore because we already fixed the child relation stuff in Localization Manager and some other configurations. So I will just remove this here now. So we have a basic table setting here, and a list of pages will not be available because we have the current page. Maybe I can just save it and check if there is something that I have to. No, it's just the current page. Yeah, so I don't have to name some other pages and fill in them. Okay, so we have this configuration now. And then you go to a specific page, text and media, for example, and go to the Localization Manager, click on the title here. Then you have to select what you actually want to do. There is an Excel export, online translation, overview with links, and the actual XML export. In most of the cases, when you're dealing with professional translation services, you want to have this one. As far as I know, most of them don't use these Excel thingies anymore. This is, in most of the cases, done by private translators who don't have the fully fledged translation software services that they actually use when they are in larger companies. But in most of the cases, XML would be the way to go. Then you have to select the target language. Maybe, for example, we use German here. And you can use an alternative source language which will be used as a kind of overlay. So when you have, for example, a German page and you translate this to Chinese and to English, it would be a good idea to first have it translated to English, because then you can use the alternative source language English to overlay all the German records, because in most of the cases it's easier to find people and much cheaper to pay people who translate stuff from English to Chinese than to find people who translate stuff from German to Chinese. So this is one of the things that you can do with the alternative source language. Then you export stuff. You have to download the file then, or maybe it's put into a kind of hot folder, and then you have to find out if it comes back and what happened to it and all these things. So I will just open it in a new tab now so that you can actually see what this is. This is an XML file which has all the content of that particular page exported. TT content is there, file metadata is there, pages is up here. So actually all the tables that we selected have been exported now. The last step is not that hard, but to get there you have to be more a developer or an integrator, but this is more or less too much. Yeah, it is definitely too much for people who actually just want to deal with translations as an editor. Now I just want to explain the things why it is not a good idea to use the infinite or tree level configuration in here. We had the one down here, because as you remember, we have the 3 deep, 2 deep, infinite, and stuff like that. The point is, what the XML actually triggers is when you get the stuff back and you want to import it. The Localization Manager makes use of the data handler of type 3. So the data handler basically is the same engine that is used when editors are actually working with type 3 and do a translation. So when you go to features and say, okay, make a new translation of that page, you will create one of these columns. When you then click on translate, something happens. And the steps are usually a record is taken from the original language, which is default here, and then it is copied to the new language. So there is a new record available, and then you fill in the content, and after filling in the content, the translated content, you store you save the record again. So all these actions are actually executed by the Localization Manager too. So each of the pages has to be translated, then each of the content records on the page has to be copied. Each of the file records or other related records, inline elements, whatever you have on the page, has to be translated and copied too. And after that, the content that has been translated with the XML file here, you just get back the same XML structure, but the translated content is in there. This content is then moved to the copied records, and after that the records are stored, and you will have all the syslog entries and all the other entries in your log file telling you, okay, I translated the record XYZ to, in this case, German, and then I translated the images and all the things. And you can imagine that this is a huge task for a single page already, depending on the amount of content which is on that page. And the task might be too large and too much for your server settings when you do that with a huge tree. And since there are not too many options there to roll back a broken transaction in type 3, you can roll back stuff that has been completed correctly. For example, when the translation has been done and is all in the syslogs, you can roll that back. But when the server stops in between, you might run into situations where the child elements already have been translated and the rest of the stuff is not available yet. So the child elements won't know which of the parent elements they actually belong to, and the structure will be broken and all these things. And as soon as this happened, many of the new approaches that you try then to translate the content again will run into several broken situations where you get feedback like there was already a translation for this record, so I could not do it, and stuff like that. So you have to clean up the database more or less manually after such a broken situation. So it's highly recommended to not use export whole trees, and especially maybe export is not the problem, but the import is. So you should do that in smaller chunks, have them translated, and then send them back to your type 3. And now there comes the localizer. Basically, the localizer still has a configuration. I don't remember if it's on congratulations or even a level below. We have a localizer settings here, yeah. So we have still a configuration, but in this case it's a configuration that just tells you, okay, which of the server types am I connected to. The default one would be the one in here, which is universal FTP hot folders. So if you have a kind of translation system which can connect via SFTP or any other connection to your folders, you can define some hot folders here. Outgoing hot folder, incoming hot folder. Currently it's file admin hot folder outgoing, so that I can actually see it in the file admin if this has been working. But of course you can use other paths here so that this will not be publicly available, but just for the engine that will be fetching the data. So this is a default setting because most of the translation services provide that already. This is not fully automatical then, because you just export stuff to the hot folder, then it is lying around there. Sometime during the day, the translation service will take a look and say, okay, I found something new, pick that up and do something with it, but you don't have control about the process from that point on. You just can see, okay, in the other folder, I got something incoming here, and you can do something with that. So you have a kind of half automated thing that you can run with a scheduler. And you can fill in some project keys and other things so that you actually know which of the projects it will be, and that this will be kind of authentication for the software that is actually picking up the stuff with the hot folder. When you have other APIs installed in here, which we are currently working on, then you will you can select other types of service here, and you will get some additional fields, for example, to connect to a real API. So this is the idea, is that we always have the same configuration here. We always have the same interface for editors, regardless of the translation service, which is then connected to the localizer. So the localizer will be the same for everybody working with it, and then the interface can connect to several APIs. This will avoid a kind of vendor lock-in situation where you're just connected to one particular service provider and you cannot switch easily to make use of another service, because you will have to teach all your editors a completely new interface. You have to reconfigure stuff completely. So the idea is, from the Typo 3 side, it should be the same for everyone. And the connectors, the connecting API from the Typo 3 side should be the same for each of the translation services, so that you could even use several different service providers for the same translation. So as soon as you configured stuff, you will you can make use of a selector. Currently, this is based on colors, because this was the first prototype that we built for a specific client projects. I'm not sure if this is the best idea to do it like this, but currently we did not find better ideas how to solve the problems, because when you are using icons here, you will fill out the matrix that we are generating later on. You will see that it is a nightmare when you imagine this with icons. So we are still trying to improve that solution, but currently this is based on steps which can then be colored. So we have a localizer here. We already created the configuration hot folder test. If you have more than one localizer configuration configured here, you can just select them here. Since there's just one, the step is skipped, and you can always create a new card or pick from a list of already created cards. After that, you can say, okay, I want to go to German, French, and Portuguese, and I want to translate these 4 tables. You can even make a start and end time setting, so that you only select records which have been created or changed within that time frame. I don't do that now because it's just to show you how things are working here. So this generates a matrix of the records on the page. So let's take a look. We have some content elements here. One of the content elements has a file reference, and we can now go back to the page module to just check if this is the case. We have some teasers here: start browsing, example pages, test CMS. This is the one with the image, make it your own, real links, powered by, so it seems correct. Now we can go back to the selector. As you can see, the card has been created already, and now you can put in stuff into your card. And as you can see, there is a matrix here, and the matrix, I will just switch to the main window without cam so you can see a bit more. The matrix actually shows you the available languages for this particular translation. So it's actually the each of the columns is selectable here. So when I switch back to just 2 you just see 2. And we just select all. We have 5 here. And as you can see, you have lots of fields within that matrix so that you can actually pick records either by language or uncheck them by language, or you can do it based on the content elements. And you can of course do this with a group of content elements containing file references too. And even then you can say, okay, I don't want the file reference in Espanol and in Italian, but just in German, French and Portuguese. Now you can store that and say, okay, this is one of the pages I want to send to the translation, and I want to send another one, for example, the images. There should be more file references in there. Pick that. And as you can see, these elements have never been translated before. The other ones on the other page, you can switch to this page now. Congratulations. There were some elements in German and French which have been sent to translation already. So maybe it would be a good idea to just skip them here because they are already on the way. Now let's get back to the other page. And as you can see, we have more file references in here because there are many images, 6 images in 3 columns. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. And of course, we want to translate each of them in this case. And we can store that too. And maybe even add a third page, which would be still okay because it's not that much content here. But still, keep in mind what I told about the performance problems. As you can see, this one has been translated already once, and at least to German, but there is another content which has not been translated yet. So we can send this one and send the other languages. Okay. Store that too. And as long as you did not finalize the card, you can still fill in content. You can even log out, log in again, fill it with more content the other day. And after you click on finalize, everything you needed to do with the Localization Manager before is now done under the hood. This creates the configuration, this excludes or includes the files, this generates the export, and this makes sure that the exported file will be sent to the right service. In this case it's just the hot folder, but when the API is available it will be directly sent to the translation service. So the expectation now would be when we go to the card here and we select localizer. Congratulations, should be the card. Yeah. As you can see, we have some things here. Hot folder test card configuration 6, 3, 2, and 1. 6 should be the one that we actually created today. And there are 5 files in here. And they have been exported, and you can even preview them. Okay, the point is I have to move that preview window to the other window in Chrome. So this would be the file that we actually exported and preview in here. So if there is an automated process now, you will get additional information. For example, you can check within the scheduler if the translation has been finished already, or other things, even things like calculate my price based on the number of words. Can you push your mic level up? Sorry, but can't hear not too much, but the others, the same problem. I'm on 100% volume. Is it better like this? Much better. Okay. Cool. So, as you can see, we have the exporters here. So, I think you can imagine the rest of the stuff. When you have a scheduler up and running, it will automatically check and give you some other states. For example, tell you, okay, this is sent translation, but it has been already translated. Then it is back from translation and has been downloaded. And then you get some additional information where you can even check before you say, okay, this is now available for the import. So it depends on the configuration that you can use within this tool. If you want this fully automated, so that you don't have to take care of anything, you just export the stuff that you selected, and everything else is just done under the hood. And a few days later, you will have some translated pages when you want to get into more control about the content before you can make these steps half automated, so that you can say, okay, I want to trigger the next step manually before it will be executed by the scheduler. So this is already working for the hot folder approach, and we are now collecting sponsoring money from the different service providers and from clients and from other people who want to translate stuff this way to create the different APIs. So if you want to be part of that project, feel free to send us an email or just ask in the chat, or go to the Coders Care project and buy a service level agreement, for example, for the Localization Manager and the Localizer, or call Petra directly, so we can make a deal with you for your services. Because currently we have, I think, 2 or 3 are already in the making. Some others were interested, but the communication is taking quite some time, because there are several people involved from several companies, because there's a client, there's the agency, the translation service, and some developers. So it takes some time until we will have finished that, but this is just to give you an overview of the things that are happening, especially in the early access program for people who are actually sponsoring development of things we do. So if you're interested in that, it would be nice if you just contact us, support us, maybe even on Twitch or via the other supporting channels. I can just show you how this will be working, because there was a question in the last session already. So we have the, for example, there should be grid elements in here. And this is currently showing the in-between option if you're not able to, because we need to get more followers on Twitch first, because we are not an affiliate yet. So if you want to sponsor us, you can go to the grid elements README on Coders Care, GitLab. There are several options like Coders Care, Patreon, Flatter, PayPal, and the Amazon wishlist, which are all linked there, so that you can support us with that. Okay, so this was an overview of the upcoming things built on top of the Localization Manager.